What is up, everybody? It is Tuesday night, special edition Doc Talk. Stick around for this one. You guys aren't going to want to miss it. Let's go. Welcome back, everybody. It's been a couple weeks. We're happy to see you. Feel free to ask your questions. Keep us rolling in the comments. This is a new edition of Doc Talk, special edition of Doc Talk. Number one, it's on a Tuesday instead of a Thursday. But our panel is down to one. That's right. We're gonna be talking to an old friend of mine over there. Um, Gosh, you've been around the block, dude. Been around the block a time or two now. So
Yeah.
yeah, introduce yourself. Tell us where you hail from. And we always make people tell us what kind of kayak they're fishing in. And I know you're fishing in a couple different kayaks, so just fill everybody in. This
Yeah.
is a
So
non-biased podcast.
I just want to start by saying, wow, like I remember the days when I first met you of Bass Crazy. It's just awesome to see you come a long way. Congratulations.
Yes, still kicking.
That's what you got to do. But yeah, so I'm Donald Corbett. The people who know me probably were around a long time ago. Got into kayak fishing a long time ago and kind of had a bait company and did all the things with 412 Bait Company. And, I guess kind of why we're here is I enjoyed kayak fishing from a different time. And I'll preface it with saying, like, throughout the conversation, I have nothing against people that want to fish for a living and they want to fish big dollar tournaments. And I just want to say that out front because some of the stuff I'll say following would make it seem like I'm not for that. But by all means, have at it, enjoy your life, do what you want to do. Just wasn't for me. But yeah, I got lucky with the way that my whole kayak fishing journey started. You take it way back. I was creek fishing, wading. I had a small boat for lakes, which wasn't really my thing. So it kind of ended up something that just sat on the side of the house. And a majority of my fishing was just wading creeks and swift water. And then got to a point where I discovered this whole thing of making baits and that it was possible to buy these molds and create your own ideas. And it just kind of caught off real fast. Bought a mold and started making baits and learning about different things and researching how fish see and colors and light projection and all these different things. It was kind of fun back then. And it ended up really leading into an interesting chain of events. I first started making baits. I made a post on a forum, and a guy that some people probably know just happened to reach out to me, Noah Heck. And at the time, he was starting a nonprofit, and their goal was to create a tournament trail for kayak fishing that also had this nonprofit aspect to it, right? So back then, what they would do is a certain amount of an entry fee would go to Heroes on the Water, is what it was back then.
Yep.
They would get wounded veterans out on kayaks, do kayak fishing and whatnot. And I thought it was kind of cool. And like, I had no idea what kayak fishing even was. So, he asked me if I would be willing to sponsor the trail. And it's kind of funny because everybody knows that after that, like that question got asked to me a lot. The answer was always yes. It's just, it, I kind of said this in a comment on one of your posts though, but like we all love the same thing. We found peace in the
Oh
same
yeah.
thing. So every time someone asked, I just said yes and sent some baits, and the rest was history in that regard. But I started working with Noah, and I showed up to my first kayak fishing tournament. It was the first kayak anglers tournament ever held. I think there was 10 people. And the most important thing about it was I got lucky in the sense that making money out of tournament winnings never had to be my goal, because my goal was promoting my company. So
Mhm.
regardless, win, lose, or indifferent, prize money, it didn't matter as long as I was getting to meet people, kind of just get out in the community and kind of just let people know I had a product. And
Mhm.
the rest was history. I fished that tournament. I think 10 of us showed up to a little private lake behind Noah's house at the time. The first tournament was hilarious. It was cold. I want to say it was in March up here in Pennsylvania. Um, Nobody caught anything. Everybody skunked except for me. I caught 2 fish, and that was good enough to win the tournament. And it just kind of caught on from there. The whole like we went there, we all lined up, we did the whole tournament thing. I mean, there was no apps. We had digital cameras. We're taking pictures of fish and then
Oh,
sharing.
it was all by hand back then, man.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. There was nothing like we have today with like,
The hog trough didn't lie.
40x, and the hog trough was there. So that
Yeah,
was
it didn't
back
lie
then. It
back
was
then.
this. Yeah, exactly. And it was amazing. Like I can't really say much else about it. And then we kind of just started doing more of the tournament thing. And I remember Noah came to me and was like, "Hey, there's this big tournament happening down in North Carolina on Lake Wiley." He's like, "Do you
Mhm.
have any interest in traveling down there?" And I was like, "Sure." Again, my mind, I didn't care about the purse or anything. It was just meeting more people from different places and kind of exposing my product further. So we went down, we did kayaks and greenbacks. Gentleman
Oh,
Adam
yeah.
Fillmore had hunt fish paddle at the time. And I think he was trying to rival the first KBF tournament that just happened a few months earlier.
Close.
Yeah, and it was just an awesome experience. I met so many people that I'm still friends with to this day, like loyal friends, not just like someone I fished with. And it's it's been that way ever since, right? And from there, I'll tell you a funny story about that tournament. So Drew Gregory had already been talking to Noah about river bassing. So
Mhm.
Drew was who invited us to come down and fish this tournament. Drew's like, just stay at my place. We had never met this guy in person ever before. We show up in Charlotte, at Drew's condo, and he's like, yeah, man, crash on the couch, blah, blah, blah. And it just set the tone for everything that my adventure in kayak fishing would be. It was just beautiful. Like this guy I never met invites me into his house. And naturally, like I researched him beforehand. I'm like, wow, this guy's pretty big in kayak fishing
Maybe.
already. And he's just kind of letting us stay with him. It was hilarious. But we did that event. I did horrible. I don't even think I caught a fish. It was terrible. The conditions were rough. It was a new lake to me. I had little to no experience with kayak fishing at the time. I did so bad. But I got to watch Drew. And, you know, anyone that's had a chance to fish with Drew, you understand that he will do anything to get to fish. Like he'll put
Mhm.
himself in harm's way to get to fish.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll never forget watching him. We're at the dam at the top of Lake Wiley. So it's almost like a little tiny river that you paddle up, but it doesn't turn into a river until the dam starts to generate. So it was like literally just kind of paddling up a creek that was calm. So we get up there. Drew takes a carabiner with a rope and hooks himself to the dam. Like literally, like how you have those ladders that are like metal pipes that come out of the
Oh,
concrete and
yeah.
go up. He hooked himself to one of those and he's literally fishing up against the dam. And I'm just looking at him like that doesn't seem safe. And then the sirens start going off. And three
Mm.
of the generators start going. So the water starts going up fast as hell. So
Oh,
Drew's
yeah.
still connected to the dam. He's going up. He's fishing, fishing, fishing. And then it stopped generating. So the water instantly drops down like a good 4 feet. And I look up and I see him coming down quick. And I watch his hand go and just swipe the carabiner off the ladder and barely make it before his kayak and everything dumped because the water dropped so much.
Oh my gosh.
And I just kind of, to me, it was like, man, this guy's the real deal. And throughout that whole weekend and being down there, we talked about river bassing and kind of how that worked. And back then, river bassing didn't have any purse. There was no money.
Mm, no.
It was all prizes. And, getting to travel the country and fish rivers, my favorite place to fish was always moving water. So I'm like, this is perfect. It's a team event. We can have fun and go do this thing, travel around, meet people. It just kind of seemed perfect. And that's
Hmm.
kind of where my journey went from there. And I got into river bassing. And a shout out to everyone I fished with in river bassing. That whole thing ended up like a family. Like we would
Oh, it
just
was very
travel
cool.
all over the country, these different places. We ended up all knowing each other. So a lot of times, like if someone had rented a house or we're kind of doing our thing, we'd invite other anglers over. There was no money. So there wasn't like this fear of talking about where did we fish yesterday or who did well and who didn't do well. It was just fun. And
Hmm.
yeah, the adventure was different and the money wasn't involved. So the travel was fun. And then I started sponsoring anglers through 412 and
Hmm.
kind of dragging them along to things. If anyone remembers kind of those tournaments, my fishing partner was like a childhood friend, had very little fishing experience. I think he blanked the first like 4 or 5 tournaments we fished. And I'm just like, come on, Mike, you got to catch a fish, buddy. Like we're struggling here. But that's what it was about, though. Like nothing
Oh yeah.
about winning mattered.
Hmm.
It was just the trip, renting a house, spending time with other anglers, having a good time, drink a beer around a fire. It was a
And
different
and
thing.
e- even the online presence was completely different. Like if when you flash back to that time, it kind of gives you cultures a little bit. Um, just thinking about, man, like how we were all connecting differently. Like there wasn't envy. It was more stoke, wouldn't you say? I mean, as far as just like, man, that's a dope photo. Man, that's a big fish. Everybody was just kind of stoked on everybody. It's like this little collection of dudes in plastic boats was just, I don't know, it was just different. It's hard to explain really to people that didn't experience that moment.
To try to explain it, the best way I can say it is everybody was learning from everyone.
Hmm.
So there wasn't that animosity like, damn, you won the event and I didn't. It was more so a desire to learn what that person did so you could do it too. Even in the
Hmm.
posting and the social media stuff and the marketing, everybody was just trying to learn.
Yeah.
So there wasn't like that animosity with like, damn, you've got more followers than me, or like
Right.
everybody shared everybody's stuff. If something cool happened, everybody was kind of like proud of their friend accomplishing whatever that was, rather than I lost to that person, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, just like what you're saying, I mean, you guys pulled us. We were kind of in the big boat scene, and you guys start, I don't know, I don't remember how you guys found us, but it was kind of like everything funneled through Noah somehow, some way, and Stuart Venable quite a bit as well for me. But it was like everybody kept finding us and posting to our page, and like we kept sharing out pictures, and it was like, these guys are cool. These photos are dope. Look at the fish that these guys are catching. I mean, it it made it look like something it piqued curiosity and something we had to go do as people that were seeking adventure and different ways to catch fish. It was like we have to try this, and yeah, the rest has been history. I mean, it's just wild how it all happened.
And that was the thing. We were fishing water that boat anglers couldn't get to. With the
Mm,
swift rivers, the shallow water, we were going through, various levels of rapids in our fishing when we were fishing river bass. And, like we're having events on rivers all over pretty much the eastern half of the country. Like
yeah,
I'll give a shout out to my favorite river ever. I used to go there every year was the Catawba. I used to
yep.
love going down there. Some of my local friends, I hear it's not the same because of like recreational stuff and the tubing and all that. But
Hmm.
we were just getting to fish that boat anglers couldn't. So it made for amazing content for us, right?
Oh,
Like
it was
a 20-inch
huge.
smallmouth, or they weren't expecting to see that as frequently as we were catching them. And it just
And the
really
big
helped us.
shoal bass.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, right? Like we were on some rivers that had bass that maybe nobody has caught before, and like these
Hmm.
weird species. And then we had Drew explaining it all because that guy, like,
Yeah.
he fished every moving water float everywhere, and he knew all these obscure species. Like I remember having conversations with him and just being amazed at his level of knowledge and how he chased fish differently.
He did. I mean, he really done something. And as the early boats were developed, um, through the eyes of this transition that you guys were really in the forefront of as a group, um, it was amazing. And it's still amazing because there's still technology that's coming from those early days and you early paddlers that's transforming some of these newer boats and what they do. I think that's really says a lot to what the way you guys were fishing and the things you guys did.
Yeah, like my first boat I ever bought, my first kayak, I bought it from Hokuan. It was a pescador. And
Mhm,
like in the realm of fishing kayaks, that was a recreational kayak. It
mhm,
was nothing compared to what we have now. You couldn't even stand in that thing unless you wanted to fall in the water. And it kind of evolved from there. And obviously I got involved with Jackson. My favorite boat still to this day is the original Kusa. I mean, if you look at my background, that was my custom Kusa that Jackson made me in pink and black. I sold it to a guy when I took my long break from kayak fishing. And last fall, I was getting back into it and kind of made some posts and whatnot. And he reached out to me. He's like, "You want your kayak back?" And I was like, "You still have it?" And he's like, "I haven't even
that's
used it.
awesome.
It's just been sitting." So I literally bought back my custom Kusa and I have it now. So it's pretty
That's
awesome. I got
awesome.
that in the Crescent. And, I don't have any brand loyalties now or sponsorships or any of that crap. So I wanted to try a Crescent out because I kind of liked what they were doing, keeping the price point right, lighter paddle
Mhm.
kayak. I mean, that's a big thing, obviously. We talk about that a lot in our personal
Oh, yeah.
conversations. Paddle kayaks is where it's at. Like, I couldn't see myself in anything else.
Yeah, and for what you do, I mean, paddle kayaks were I mean, it fits the mold perfectly, especially for the way you guys fish and the rivers that you guys are fishing. It just, it's awesome. Um, so 412 happens, and 412 was amazing. I call it 412. You call it 412. So see, that's terrible on my behalf, but I always called it 412. Um, you crushed it with your research and development in the Bay Area was phenomenal. You had some of the best colors that have ever hit the market, still to this day. You had one of the best spinner baits that I have ever used in the phase. Do you miss it?
It's interesting, right? So, like, I mean, early on, I decided that I was making baits for
Mm,
me. I wasn't making them for customers. So I was able to get away with that whole thing where, like, I'm not trying to create a bait that catches
mhm,
fishermen. I know that's cliche to say, but that's the truth. Like, I was making baits to catch fish. I didn't care what people thought it looked like. So that was my focus, right? And
mhm.
I did that for years and it grew and grew and grew. And I mean, as the people can remember, there was times I was so busy that it was just insane. Like,
Yeah.
80-hour work weeks, all night making baits, just try to keep up. And I kind of say it's like a double-edged sword, right? There's aspects of it like this, right? The adventure, the
Mhm,
traveling, the meeting people, and like with the tournament fishing, I use this as an opportunity to meet my customers and interact with them in person.
mhm.
And I'm a big proponent of loyalty, right? Like, if you buy things from me repeatedly, I want to do what it takes to create that loyalty. I don't want it to just be because of buzz or marketing. Like, I want there to be a person behind the purchase. And that's what I tried to be for the customers. I miss that. I
Mhm.
miss the traveling, the wins, right? Like, that was a big thing for me, just feeling the wins. One of the most amazing moments of my life was when Matt Ball won the KBF on one of my
Yeah.
baits. Literally, in all the pictures, had on a 412 hoodie, and I
Mhm.
didn't even sponsor the guy. Like, he was a customer.
Yeah.
And that to me just like was a moment for a couple things, right? Like, I've arrived, this is a big deal. But it also proved to me the loyalty I built by doing what I did, traveling, hanging out with my customers, fishing with them. it meant something. Like, how often can you say that a guy wins on the biggest stage at the time, has on shirts from a company, shouts out the company, tells the bait he used, but we had nothing, like no relationship at all. Like he was a customer that would just order baits. And obviously that wasn't the same after the fact. Like there was a
Oh yeah.
conversation and we righted that wrong, but but at that point, like that was big for me. And being able to just have something like that that showed I really made an impact on my customers, that's the
Mhm.
stuff I miss. But like
Well, and
towards the end,
that's really speaks to like in that time period that we're talking about, there was so much more grassroots marketing, like what you were doing. Jackson was doing it, and some of the other companies and brands and people involved. It was a lot of that grassroots going. You had to go to the tournaments. You connected it that way, and that's just how things were. It was more boondoggle style, I guess would be the best way to put it.
yeah, and you know what? Like every tournament I went to in a different area, like, you know what? I would be like, all right, I'm going to Tennessee. You know, I'd go fish in Eastern Tennessee for a river bassin event. And it was always the same story when I would travel, right? Like I would gain some new customers. People would start buying baits. They'd start talking about the fish they're catching. But then it would lead to the kayak shops in the area reaching out
Mhm.
and be like, hey, we want to carry your products. You know, Uncle Lem's, Caney Fork. Like those were
Yep.
all retailers from those areas because of me traveling, meeting people, building that loyalty. And the recipe just worked back then. I don't know if it could today, but it did then.
I think it still can work. I think it's, and we'll get into this later, maybe a little bit of what's missing. But as we go through this conversation, we'll get to that part of it. Um, yeah, man, you had fishing online. I mean, there were several. I still buy 412 baits from fishing online. They are still out there, kids. So if you're looking, they still exist. Just
Yeah.
not
So
got the same blood on the hooks that they used to have.
believe it or not, the guy that owns 412 Bait Company now, I buy my baits from. So it's a guy I trust to make what I made in my vision.
Mhm.
And he's a good dude. His name's Joe. He's a great bait maker. The quality is, yeah, I don't want to take away from myself and say it's as good, but it's pretty damn close.
It's pretty
Good
good.
enough that I don't mind placing orders and getting my baits from him just like anybody else.
The one that cracks me up is kind of the free minnow and the smaller versions of it and the different things and like how Ned fishing has gotten so popular, but really you kinda was there before it was a thing in a way.
And that bait is a testament to catching fish and not fishermen. There's not a damn thing about that bait that looks appetizing.
No.
It just is what it is. But like anyone who's fished it can tell you, once you tie it on and start throwing it, you catch fish. Like some tournaments that
100%.
I would have never had a chance to place in, I won because of that bait. And it looks beautiful in the water, fish
Mhm.
weightless, on a Ned, you
Yep.
know, anything. It's versatile as hell, and it gives you that slow approach where if nothing else is working, it'll get you a limit.
It will, for sure. And the Yoda was another one of my favorites. I talk about the spinnerbait, but the spinnerbait was nothing to me without the Yoda, and I still would do a lot of things for Cold Steel to come back. I know he's lost the Cold Steel color, but man, that was just one trailer that it's you don't really see another mold out there like that anymore. It just had the right movement. It was subtle, but it worked really well with spinnerbaits, chatterbaits, and I'm out of Cold Steel and not able to get any more. We'll talk about that
It's a
later.
tough one. I mean, I'm sure if you asked him, he might bring it back, maybe after this. But I remember who came up with that combination of bait and trailer. That was Noah. So,
Really?
and he came up with probably the combination that became more popular than all else. It was a
Oh
dreamsicle
yeah.
spinnerbait and the copperhead Yoda. And still to this day, I fish it. But he started fishing it and he kicked my ass like 3 tournaments in a row with my
Mhm.
own baits. And I'm like, well, I got to start throwing the phase 3 at the time because him and I went through phase 1 and 2 really
Yep.
before it ever hit market. And then phase 3 was like, all right, we got it. So now we
Yeah.
pushed out the market. But I started fishing them like crazy. And now I'm keeping up with him. And then we're going out and fishing, river bass and events and placing, and other people started picking up on it. Something about that bait as a trailer just makes a spinnerbait wobble and vibrate just a little bit different than a normal paddle tail. And I don't know what it is, but like obviously anyone that's fished it knows it just draws strikes.
Well, I had one dreamsicle left that you had made in my tackle box, and I've carried it around because it's like I don't want to use it unless I have to use it. Well, last year we went to film an Instagram reel for Cast King, and we was going to film and catch a fish on a spinnerbait. So it was like we're going to force feed these fish a spinnerbait until one of them eats it. We went through white, we went through chartreuse, nothing, nothing, nothing. It was like it was getting annoying to the point that I reached down in the box, pulled out the old gem, and instead of I did not have any dreamsicle trailers left. I thought, well, bluegill, this has that a little bit of that to it. So I grabbed a green pumpkin curly tail, cut it off, put it on there, boom. Started catching fish in an instant with dreamsicle. So
And
testament to
that
that
was a
color
color
for
that
sure.
Noah literally asked me to make, which was
It's
interesting.
it matches a lot of bluegill, pumpkin seed style fish. It's just a great color.
That combination with the gold blades and moving water, just something about,
Mhm.
the common species in moving water, eastern half of the US. When all else fails, it doesn't. It's a weird circumstance I've never been able to explain, like to the point where, oh, you're new to tournament fishing, just throw this in a free minnow all day, you'll do great. And it
Yeah.
works.
And your blades, I think, were a little bit bigger than most that you buy out of the pack, so it had a little bit more thump to it out of the gate than a lot of baits did.
I had to, because we got so common with the Yoda as a trailer. If the
Mhm,
blades weren't just a little bit bigger, it would take over the action of the bait, and it would kind
mhm.
of wobble too much, go too far. And we found the perfect balance. And that's where the phase 4 came into play. We changed blades from 3 to 4, and that
Yep,
just ended up the perfect storm. That's when we invested in the 24 karat gold blades, took them a step further. And yeah,
it made all
I
the
still
difference.
to this day, like, I don't think I could win tournaments without those baits.
Well, and that blade was big enough too that if you got yourself in a position, you could really throw that bait out there and just jerk it up to the top of the water, and you could really get a huge wake across the top of the water that these fish would just crush it like a buzz bait. You could almost dual purpose that bait if you was willing to reel fast enough to keep it up at the top of the water column.
That's why I tended to use the quarter ounce more than the 3/8, because you could
Mhm,
get it to the point, like you said, almost like a buzz bait where it's creating a small wake right at the top. But with
mhm.
all that action, I mean, on a shallow river, if you're fishing a section of river that's 3 feet deep, like, how deep do you need to go? Like, the fish are going to see
Yeah,
it one way or another. So bringing it along the surface, just creating more agitation, it just worked out.
it did. Still best spinnerbait I've ever used. It's like the holy grail of spinnerbaits. If you guys don't have those, get on the website, head over to I still believe Fishing Online carries everything. So head over there, check those guys out. You guys can pick up some 412 baits. But as let's kind of start moving the other direction. So everything's going great, man. Like you're fishing a lot. You're doing a lot of you guys were doing a lot of stuff for JK. You Noah, everybody. River Bassin was cooking. I mean, it was the peak, really, and things started to change for you. And let's kind of let's kind of go there and talk about some of the feelings that maybe started to happen for you that kind of led you to step back for a little while.
Yeah. So with the business, it got to a point where I had two choices really. I could invest in a facility and take it to another level, machines and packers and all these things, or I could ship production overseas. And everybody that knows me and knows my story and the things I used to write in blogs, that wasn't my thing. I never really intended to take it overseas. And the whole facility thing at the time, I just didn't really want to get into having to manage so many people. Ironically,
Mhm.
that's literally what I did next, but that's kind of funny in itself. So 412 reached a point where I had two options. I either took on investors and built a facility like full on production, or I sold. And I ended up having an interested buyer. And to be quite honest, I was getting a bit burned out. It was a lot, 80 hours a week, just making baits all night, trying to run out on a Thursday, pre-fish Friday, fish a tournament Saturday, head back home to make more baits.
And
It
you
ran me
burnt the
down,
crap
right?
out of your hand at one point too.
Yeah, dude. I like at one point I think I took off like half of my hand skin because like 350-degree plastic. I was tired as shit. And I turned around and I bumped a vat of plastic and it just tore straight across my hand. And by instinct, like how you just try to wipe it off? I just wiped all my skin right off my hand with it. And I'm just looking at
Mhm.
open flesh and I'm just like, oh, that's bad. But yeah, so long story short, got burned out, had a couple options, went the route of selling. And then I looked at the tournament fishing thing, right? And I'm kind of like, do I want to keep doing this? And by that point, one of the things that was happening was all the trails I loved, the grassroots stuff, river bassin stopped. There was no more river bassin. All the local trails, and like, I love these places, by the way, kayak anglers, MSK in West Virginia, Southwest Virginia kayak anglers, all the trails, Queen City and Charlotte. I used to just bounce
Yeah.
around to fish local tournaments.
Mhm.
It's what I loved. But with the KBF, at that time, they were trying to get these local trails to come into their fold.
Mm.
So, eh, personally, not speaking for anyone else or saying anything negative, everything that I loved in a local trail was disappearing because of that affiliation, right? The money was getting bigger. People were more concerned about qualifying for some national tournament with big payouts. And a lot of what I loved about it and found peace in, like truly found peace in, was expiring. It was disappearing.
Mhm.
So the best way I could put it is I just kind of sat back, looked at it all, and was like, just gonna head back to the corporate world for a little bit and take a break from this. And it ended up being longer than I hoped. I mean, I was gone probably a good 4 years just away from it all, watching, quietly watching,
Mhm.
and it progressed further that direction. And that's what kept me away. I was just kind of like, I have no interest in trying to win tournaments and do that for a living. I had gotten back into the software industry, was kind of doing totally different things. And that just wasn't what I liked about it, I guess. Nothing against anyone that wants to do that. I understand
No,
people want to make
by
a
no
living
means.
doing this, but that wasn't what I enjoyed. I enjoyed the friendship, you know, after an event, having 10, 15 people all gather together at a house that somebody rented, enjoy some beer, a fire, whatever. That's what I
Mhm.
enjoyed about it. It was like sanity for me, almost like therapy. It's weird to say it that way, but that's kind of what it was for a lot of us back then. It was a common saying, right? Like, this is my
Oh, yeah.
sanity. And that wasn't there. So I took a break. Finally, last fall, I happened
Mhm.
to move literally onto a river. And I had lived here for months, and the river was right at the end of the street. And finally, I'm like, you know what? I wonder if those rods that I still have a few of, if I can clean one of them up, put some fresh line on, and go check it out. And I walked down to the river and made a couple casts, caught a smallmouth, caught a good largemouth, posted a picture just being funny. And people are like, holy crap, he's fishing again. And
Yeah.
it felt fun. So rest is history. I got two kayaks. I rebought everything. Like literally, I had nothing at this point. And here I am. I'm ready to get back into local tournaments. Like nothing national. I have no interest in that stuff. But I
Right.
just want to go back and visit the trails, like the rivers that I loved, and see the people that I used to fish with. Just that local
Mhm.
stuff. And I also can say I noticed some of those local trails start to revert back to their roots, right? Like
Yeah, you're
maybe
seeing
we
some of that.
maybe we don't want that connection to that big national thing anymore. And
Mhm.
that just it kind of helped me want to get back involved, right? Like I can't wait to go to a tournament in West Virginia, maybe fish the New or the Elk River with the MSKA guys and the KA guys in Western PA. Maybe go out to the
Oh, yeah.
Susky to fish a KA. Like, it's awesome to me that that stuff. Like, I feel like people are finding value in the local stuff again, right? Because of the
Yeah.
stress level so much less.
Well, and I think that as times changing, people are starting to see maybe that the big dollar amount that you're paying out. Number one, I mean, out of the gate, let's think about it. I mean, in reality, is you miss work. If you're going somewhere big, you could miss work for up to a week or 3 days to a week. So that's negative money right out of the gate by the time you've missed work, paid an entry fee, um, and then your cost of travel, whatever. And I think with the economy and the different things the way that it is right now, they're scaling back a little bit. I think that's kind of paying homage to some of these local trails in a big way. Saying, hey, we can fish at home and do some pretty cool stuff.
When you look back, right? You look back at those small trails. The story for people starting was almost always the same, right?
Hmm.
Somebody would see something on social media about these kayak tournaments local to them. They would go to, Dick's, Dunham's, a big box store, buy some $250, $400 kayak and show up.
Yep.
And it was
Oh
cool.
yeah.
Like that was fine. Sometimes those people won tournaments and got hooked. But like now, the situation's a little different, right? By the
Hmm.
time you invest in a Hobie, you get a motor, you have your 10 rods and your screens and everything else. You've got 10 grand in equipment. You've got a high entry fee,
Hmm.
and you take a week off work to go pre-fish for this big event. And let's face it, right? Out of the 200 people that enter one of those events, maybe 30 of them have a shot. The rest are
Yeah.
just kind of filling in the entry fees and the end purse.
Hmm.
So your average guy spends all this money thinking he's going to make this big future out of this situation, spends all this money on a tournament, renting a place to stay, camping, whatever, boats and everything else. And they go to that first tournament and they place like 130th. Like, talk about a killer to your enthusiasm. Like, that finishes their tournament career as quickly as it started. But when you
Oh
could
yeah.
show up in a $250 kayak with 3 rods and maybe place, even if you didn't, you were like, I'm gonna come back to the next one because you didn't
Yeah.
waste anything. You spent a Saturday. It
Yeah.
like there was no major investment to lose, and I think that's what was
Hmm.
different and why it blew up so fast. It was
Right.
accessible, cheap, fun, inviting. All of us were just we didn't care if someone showed interest. 9 times out of 10, someone will be like, "You don't have a kayak yet? Great, I have a couple. Come." We'll set
Yeah.
you up with a vest. We'll set you up with a paddle, a kayak, whatever you need. Just bring your rods and your gear.
Hmm.
And now, like, how often is someone going to take $10,000 worth of a kayak and be like, "Hey, just come use mine," like, and risk them flipping with all these screens and batteries and all this stuff?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
there's a lot to lose, right?
There is a lot to lose these days. Very much so. And I think there again, I think it is coming back around because you do need both both worlds, I think, in a lot of ways. You need for those guys that start someplace if they're very interested, and you do need someplace for them to go to kind of like test their skills. And a lot of folks love that competitive side of trying that, and that's great. I mean, that's what the dream is for a lot of folks in fishing, and you know, it's just part of it. But you always, I think, need those grassroots trails to get people invited and get people started and get them in their first kayak. I mean, that's huge, dude.
And it used to be so much more accessible cost wise, right?
Hmm.
And I see it coming back too. Like, you see companies starting to, we had that extreme shift. Everything went to pedal drives or motor specific
Remember when
built
we used to
kayaks.
argue about pedals and paddles?
went a whole different direction, didn't it?
Yeah, we kind of went a different way.
And pedals are cool, but like I'm not a lake fisherman. There's sections of the river I fish in a tournament where, I might do a mile where the whole time bottom of my kayak's dragging because I'm in inches of water just picking out holes. And
Right.
that never would work with pedal drives. So it just wasn't my thing. Nothing against them, but there was nothing compared to the paddle kayak, or more specifically, the original Kusa, right? Like, people might not realize this because of the way kayaks are designed now, but if you ever had a chance to paddle an original Kusa, just the way the hull was designed with that banana shape, you could float backwards through rapids, not paying attention to what's happening behind you, a rock, anything, and just know that that kayak was so forgiving, it would bounce you off rocks. And as long as you kind of had that hip action comfortable, there was no risk. You could be floating backwards through rapids, targeting holes on the side that no one else would cast to because they're focused on getting through the rapids. But
Mhm.
like those kind of kayaks just aren't around the way they used to be. I'm glad I found mine. I'm never letting go of that
Uh,
thing.
But no, I think, we do see some different. Of course, we're on our third model of the Kusa now. And then there's other river kayaks that have kind of popped up here in the last couple of years, which is neat to see that there's still a call for a good river paddling boat. And, seeing I think that there is a group of people that will always be true river fishermen in some way, shape, or form. They're still out there. They might not, their voice might not just be as loud as it was at one time, I think is maybe the difference because it's overshadowed maybe by some of the other stuff.
I think what ended up happening was like you got to the point of the big money tournaments, right? That was the drive. And
Hmm.
rivers, like river bassing, for example, it wasn't for everybody. I think to this day, there's still a lot of people that are afraid of swift moving water, and rightfully so. Like it's dangerous. But once you get comfortable with it, there's a passion behind it. And I think those fears, even to this day, have all but eliminated that type of water from competition. You
Yeah, in
know,
a lot of ways.
by having, like, for example, the New River, right?
Hmm.
How many people can you think of that'll look at a tournament on the New River, start Googling and looking at the water and be like, that scares the shit out of me. I'm not fishing that. And
Several.
I think that's why a lot of the swift moving river events have faded away, or maybe they have a lake option involved where if you don't want to fish the river, you can fish the lake. And that kind of muddies the beauty of we're all in this crazy fast moving body of water together. We got to navigate this insanity and manage to catch fish. Like
Hmm.
there's something about it that like I can't even begin to explain. It being
Well, I
able to
think that,
beat a river is like one of the most satisfying things.
and I think that kind of goes back to the early days too. Like you had alluded to, everybody was learning. So not only was you learning fishing techniques, I think we were all learning how to paddle in a lot of different ways. Like there was advice that was being given more publicly on how to paddle a kayak and how to position and different things because obviously we weren't using a lot of pedal drives then. There was only one major company out there at the time that had a pedal drive. The rest of us were all paddling. So there was a lot that went into crossing eddies, boat positioning, learning the different paddle strokes and the different things that go along with it. I think now you really don't have that kind of teaching as much in our sport as far as learning paddle strokes and boat positioning in places like rivers.
See a lot of what you're explaining just coming back in the fall. I fished one tournament. I went to a kayak anglers tournament. Clearly, it was a river tournament because that's what interests me. And I'm floating down the river, and it was a big event. I think there was like 60 anglers or something. I mean, for a local trail, it's a big event. And I noticed what I used to see in river bassing versus what I see now. Right, like
Hmm.
there's people in Hobies trying to get down a river with shallow sections. And I see them yanking their drive up out of the kayak and trying to get through these tight spots. And
Hmm.
then, the basics that you mentioned, right? Like we know having fished swift water, you come through a rapid, right? As soon as you see that eddy, you want to tuck that paddle down and just turn right into that eddy backwards and fish it as you float out. And nobody was doing that kind of stuff. And that was just like automatic back then. You'd see somebody do it and you're like, oh, that's how you hit that spot. You kind of roll into it and you let your kayak flow and you end up pointing upstream and you're perfectly lined
Mhm.
up to hit that hole. But I didn't see people doing that kind of stuff. And like, I didn't think about what you just said until right now, but I guess nobody's teaching that stuff anymore, really.
Mhm. No, it's not talked about near as much, and that's kinda some conversations that, we've all had here recently is, man, it's just it's very different. I mean, you look at you remember when we used to work shows. Used to work shows out in PA with River's Edge and different things like that. When one of the things that we prided ourselves on at Jackson Kayak was we would go up to people like when people would come in a booth, it's like, okay, well, what kind of water are you paddling? And then that conversation led us down a road to where we could talk about the Kusa. We could talk about, okay, maybe the big rig's right for you. Maybe the Cruise 12 is right for you. There was a conversation that went on based around the type of water you paddled, to which kind of boat you would need. And you really left with a good fit as far as being taught at your local paddle shop as well. And I think a lot of people now they go out, we gather a lot of content online, which is not a fault of our own. It's easily accessible, but we see that I've got a NAR FD and it's got two screens and all these different gizmos and gadgets. Well, automatically that light comes on in your head. It's like, okay, well, I need to build my kayak to resemble that before they even ever really understand it or try it. And I think that's one of the big problems that we see out there today as well. People just don't really understand as well maybe what type of boat they're buying or what they're really getting into.
Yeah. And to your point, back then when we did shows, you're exactly right, right? The conversation was had like, what water are you fishing? What fish are you
Mhm.
targeting? What combination of water, right? Like a guy that says, I just fish rivers, we were going straight to the
Mhm.
Coosa. It was a no question.
Oh, yeah.
But the guy that said he was fishing Lake Erie, we're looking at the Cuda 14.
Yep.
Or, the person said they were fishing a combination of both. The Cuda 12 is a good mix. You can get away
Mhm.
with doing both. It's not going to do either or exceptionally, but it'll do both good enough. And like, I guess that was our goal back then, right? Put someone in a kayak that's going to do what they need to do. But
Yes.
now with the marketing and the big events and what people see, they think the kayak that's going to do what they need it to do is that big one with all the gear and
Mhm.
all the electronics. When in reality, no one told them that they just might be a guy that's going to car top a light kayak and go out after work and have a good time. So, he chases what he sees and thinks he needs.
Mhm.
But then, like, come 5:30 p.m., you get home from work and you're like, I would love to fish right now. But then you're like, yeah, you know what? I got to grab all those batteries. I got to hook the trailer up to the truck, all this crap.
Mhm.
And what do? They're like, nah, not tonight. But back in the
Yeah.
days of then, where kayaks were 65, 75 pounds, it was throwing it in the truck bed. It was throwing it
Mhm.
on the top of a car, whatever. In 15 minutes, you could be loaded up to go to the water. There wasn't all
Yeah.
this setup, right? And I feel like not necessarily people are making the wrong decision, but they're not looking at it as what is right for them. They're just looking at what they see marketed, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, those
Yeah.
those lightweight kayaks are freedom. Being able to take a 65-pound kayak, lift it over your head, put it on top of your car, and be at the river in 15 minutes and set up and go out, three rods, no electronics.
Mhm.
That that is where your average person gets to fish multiple times a week. And that's the goal, right?
And just having that boat that's small enough that you can do that with and throw it in the truck bed. I'm gonna take the weight out of it because I know my boat weighs more than what you're talking, but, my X is set up with nothing. I can literally throw a multi-box in it, my hooks and weights, and a couple rods and go. I've kept it that way intentionally just for that boat that you could throw it in the back of your truck and you can go. There's no qualm about it. You don't need to drag the trailer. You can drag it through the woods, you can drag it up down the launch ramp, whatever you gotta do just to get it into the water. And there's just something about that and having those nose screens where you're just man, you're fishing the fields. That's beautiful.
And that's the
It's
beauty,
freedom.
right? Like when your kayak doesn't have all that stuff to deal with, the trailer and everything else, you could pull up to any bridge on a river on the side of a road, just
Hmm.
slide that kayak right down the hill and you're on the water. That
Yep.
you don't need a boat ramp. You don't need all this stuff. Like, and guess what? Now you're fishing water that no one else can get on unless they
Mhm.
have that 70-pound kayak. You can literally push over a hillside and go launch.
Yeah.
It's all part of the beauty of it, right?
Yeah. And it's amazing to see. I mean, looking at it and looking at from where we came from to looking at it now, did you ever think that it was hitting this point? Did you ever imagine that it was going to get to this point?
I'll say yes. So I saw early on because I was kind of like in that transition, right? Where
Hmm.
kayak tournaments locally were 10 to 20 people. Like I was kind of there when it was just finding its footing. But then I was also there when a local tournament was 50 people. So I got to watch that insane growth. And I kind of had it in the back of my head like everything else, right? Like hunters can understand this, I'm sure.
Hmm.
Once something gets a social media buzz going about it, everybody's wondering how they can make money off of it. And
Okay.
I knew that would happen to kayak fishing. It was inevitable. And it was already happening. So I kind of knew it was going to go this direction. It's really interesting to me how far it's gone because
Hmm.
the reason I saw it explode was because it was accessible and cheap.
Hmm.
But now it's not that anymore. So I wonder like when will kayak fishing kind of take a step back and look at itself and be like, wait a second, what made us popular isn't here anymore. So, and I kind of think it's happening to your point. The local
It is.
trails are starting to head back the direction they came from, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think it really is. I know our JK trails kind of cater into that. Of course, we have the big event at the end of the year, but at the same time, you're really able to. It's kind of like it's a lot like KA. You're really able to fish your local area, and then everybody kind of meets up at something bigger, maybe at the end of the year, which is cool. And KA kind of, as it's grown, has kind of got to this, is it's adopted some different states and all that kind of stuff. But it's neat to see people coming to the ramp. Like we have everybody check in, check out
Mhm.
for the JK Trail, which is very cool in Indiana. Like everybody meets up, you pay cash at the ramp. We still use Tourney X, which is fine, but they meet up at the ramp, pay their entry fee, so you get to talk to them there. And then at the end of the tournament, everybody comes back to in-person awards, which is it's great. You get to see that local group. White Guard out in the comments. I didn't know White a year ago today, and now we've become good friends, and it's cool to see. And it's all because of those interactions at the local events, which is fun. And we all, just like you were talking, we got together down at Kentucky Lake for our big championship, hung out, had some beers, ate some good food, and rest is history. So I do think it is coming back. I think some of the stuff that's River Bass in Part Two. I don't even know what he's calling it.
I think it's like
Is
kayak
getting ready.
adventure series, I believe.
Yeah, it's kind of a boondoggle type of thing, and that's going to be neat to see it coming back. I think there again, stuff like KA, the MSKA, the local trails are starting to rise back up, and I think that's neat. Will we ever get it back to what it was? I don't know. I don't know. It's hard to say.
I think
I think we have
you'll
to be
never
so much
capture
more
those
diverse.
initial feelings. I mean, that
Yeah,
shit was special. Let's just be honest.
it
Just
was. It was
watching it
cool.
grow. I mean, there were so many new companies coming out of the woodwork and exploding, and like
Hmm.
business owners doing things for the right reasons, being loyal to their customers. And it was a cool time. I mean, I don't think we'll ever see that specifically, but, personally, I would love to see the simpler side of kayak fishing kind of have a resurgence, right? And I kind of have that own view of myself. Like I was joking about it and talking to people last year when I got back into this. I got a couple kayaks, started fishing my river down the street. In like 2 months, I covered 30 miles of river, probably like 3 times over. And I was just like, it was like a drug that I just found my way back to. And I went nuts. And then like I started thinking about it, and I'm like, you know what? I got to get a truck. I got to do all these
Mhm.
things. And my mind started to go in the wrong direction. And I was like, you know what? I don't have to do any of that. Like, I drive Mini Coopers, literally Mini Coopers. And I'm going to throw a rack on the top of that shit and show up at tournaments with a kayak on top of a Mini Cooper because I don't care. Nothing matters in that regard, right? As long as I get
No.
there, I only need 3 rods. I've never seen a river that I can't catch the best fish in it with 3 rods. And
Yeah.
I don't need a graph. Like, if I could see the bottom of the river, what the hell do I need a graph for? So, like,
No.
I thought
It's
it
more
through.
about reading the water.
And that's it, right? Water surface is more important than what's
Mhm.
happening under it. It tells you everything that's happening under it. But I even had that moment just getting back into it where I'm like, shit, I got to go buy a new truck, got to do this, got to get a trailer. And
Yeah.
then I was like,
We
wait, wait,
talked
wait, wait,
about
wait.
rods. Yeah.
Yeah. And even rods. Like, I started messing around buying cheap rods and like trying out different brands of some of these
Mhm.
newer brands. And then I'm like, you know what? Like, this is crazy. I'm just gonna go back to the shit that used to work 10 years ago, and I'm sure it still works. And
Oh,
it
yeah.
was just that. It was fine. I was breaking rods and shit, trying all these new brands, and I'm like, all right, let me just go back to what I know.
That's awesome. So we did have a question. I'm gonna flip it back up here. I don't know if you can see the screen or not. It's a little
Yep.
long. Um, let's see here. Paddling
That's a
up
good
current
question if you don't
against
know
current.
any better.
There you go. I'll let you filter.
Yeah, so basically, when you're working in swift current or even moderate, right? You're not coming back up. It's impossible. You can't have an enjoyable day of fishing trying to float a mile down a river and paddle back up it. You do float trips. So
Mhm.
again, camaraderie, right? The thing we're talking about. You need a partner. So you take 2 vehicles, you go down to the takeout, you drop the vehicle there, you take their kayak, you load it onto your vehicle, you drive up river to the put in, you guys launch, you float down to the other vehicle, throw both kayaks on that, go back up to the other vehicle, and you part ways. You plan
Mhm.
these boat trips. We used to do it in tournaments, everything.
Oh, yeah.
I even knew a guy, my buddy Randy, he had a supermoto, which is like a dirt bike with street bike
Yes.
tires. They're pretty neat. He would hook that on the back of his truck. He would take the supermoto to the takeout, chain it to a tree,
Mhm.
drive up to the put in and launch, come back down to the takeout, chain the kayak to the tree, take the bike, ride back to the truck, and go get it. Like, you can get real
Mhm.
creative with this stuff, but yeah, like, that's all part of it, right? You need someone else to enjoy the day with for that float trip to be set up and have fun, unless you're really creative like Randy was. But I mean, not everybody has a motorcycle to throw in the back of their
And
truck
for
and all that.
safety reasons. For safety
Yeah,
reasons, it's best
exactly.
to have somebody with you.
You make a good point. Like, I'm comfortable floating down a river by myself just because of years and years of doing it. But if there's moving water or any rapids of any sense, it's probably not the best idea.
No, it can go bad. If it can go bad, it can go bad on a river quickly. Just takes a second. But yeah, even Uber. I mean,
Yeah, I
I
mean,
know
Uber
some guys
works.
up in Indianapolis that would like chain their kayak up, call Uber, have Uber pick them up, go get their truck, and come back.
There's a lot of ways you can do it. And to your point, right? Like, I think we need to touch on that for a second. Rivers will kill you.
Yeah, oh
It
yeah.
don't take much. A simple weird circumstance coming through a small rapid, you roll over, hit your head off a rock, you don't have a life vest on, that's the end.
Yeah.
So I guess the one point I should make in all this positive talk of rivers is you have to respect them. You know, eh, I guess that brings me to something too, like why I find rivers so special, right? You go out on a river and you just take a moment in swift water. You know, you got the beaver building the dam, you got the fish nesting on the dam, you got a
Mhm.
bird of prey of some sort, depending upon where you're at, scooping fish. As you float down that river, you don't see other people, right? Because it's a swift moving river. There's no boats and stuff. It gives you this humbling sense that all this stuff is happening, all this wildlife, all these things that complement each other. And the only thing out of place is me. I don't
Mhm.
belong here. All this stuff helps each other. I'm literally just in the way. And I get to float down the river and enjoy that peace.
Mhm.
That's the one thing. Like, we could talk all day about kayak fishing being inviting or not, but like, that's it
Yeah.
for me. The river being humbling. It just reminds me that I don't matter to it. And it's the
Mhm.
most beautiful thing ever, right? Like, you find this sense of peace out there. Like, all this is happening around me. The only thing that doesn't matter is me.
Yeah. I mean, it's the best way to that's the best way to put it. And I think, when you're in one of those shallow rivers and you're working and you're basically you're fighting against Mother Nature is what you're doing. You're dragging up, you're over logs, you're
Sure.
dragging through shallow bars and different things like that. And I mean, you're on your feet, you're in your kayak, you're hopping out of your kayak. I mean, there's a lot of movement to get to some of these places in some of these shallow areas, and it's just there's something that's just so damn satisfying at the end of it.
If you can catch fish in that scenario, some of the stuff that we do to get to a spot, it's just rewarding in a different level.
It is.
You're
It's
challenging nature, something that's clearly better than us. And
oh yeah.
if you can put together that bag of amazing fish on water that most people don't get to navigate, like, the New River is an amazing example. There's sections of the New River that the only way you're getting out if something happens is by helicopter. Like,
Mhm,
just the thought of that humbles me, let alone being on it and experiencing it and catching fish and having an enjoyable
mhm,
day. Like, it's a whole psychological thing, and I don't find peace anywhere like I find on a river.
yeah, and, to that testament, even your flatter rivers, I mean, you can get caught up in something and have just as talking about the new, I mean, if our river here's flat, but, something could go wrong, and there's only, you know, you're gonna get to that point where only a helicopter or it's gonna take a while for another boat to get to you, if you're mid-float somewhere along the line, so and who's to say you've got signal?
Yeah,
So
that's kind of it, right? Like, you gotta really be careful. It takes you back to, like, your roots is just nature, right? Like, we have a lot of
mhm.
safety nets in life. There's not a lot of
Oh, yeah.
fear that we carry day to day, but a river gives a little bit of that back to you
Yep.
because, you know what? If something happens to me and I grab my phone, it might not do me any good. Like, so you have to be cautious in a sense that you have to plan for these things. It's just all very humbling.
It is, and in a beautiful way.
Yeah.
It's humble in a beautiful way. That's there's no other way to put it to the folks at home. If you haven't experienced it, call us up, we'll go. We'll go with you. You might be part of our next feature film, but we'll go with you.
And that's kind of the cool thing, right? Like,
Mm.
back then, it was nothing for someone to be like, "Hey, I'm interested in this kayak fishing thing." And it's like, "Well, 4 or 5 of us are going out this Saturday. You wanna come?" It was just
Yeah.
normal. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how much that happens now. I'm too far detached to really say if it does or doesn't, but that was the norm back then, you know? The first time I ever got onto a kayak and fished, Noah reached out to me, that whole deal I explained earlier about
Mhm,
sponsoring the trail, and he was like, "You know what? Meet us at Lake Arthur, which is a lake, north of Pittsburgh." And was like, "We'll
mhm.
get you a kayak, we'll get you paddle, life vest, everything, get you out on the water." And that's what I did, and it got me hooked. But it was all
Yep.
somebody else's
Mhm.
stuff. And I feel like that used to be the norm, right? Like, everybody would just let everybody use their stuff and get you
Mhm,
out there because we wanted people to experience that peace, the camaraderie, the stuff that we loved.
mhm. Yeah, I think it still happens a little bit. I know it happens for me, I let a couple people use some of our boats over the winter. They now are over towards the end of last summer, and they now own those said boats, which was really cool. I shared the pictures with you, the couple of boys that had never went down the river or the creek like that, and we pulled up to the first tree, and it's like, man, I guess we're done. We're gonna have to turn around and go back. And I hopped out, drug over the tree, and we just kept going. And it was that kid come back and he bought that bike. I mean, it's like I want that kayak. I've
Yeah.
done seen what this will do. and that's pretty freaking cool. I got to a place that I didn't realize that I could get to. I want that boat. And just the same with you and Noah. And now the fishing family grows by too. So
I'm going to put you on
it's
hold
neat
for
to
one
see.
second. This beer caught up with me. I got to hit the restroom before I have a
There you
problem. Give me 1 minute.
go. So while Don's checking out, if you guys have got questions in the audience, feel free to ask them right now. Go ahead and pop those up. I'm going to pay some bills while we're doing this little break here. So we've got to thank Jackaon Kayak Orion Coolers for letting us do this kayak fishing podcast. It's been absolutely phenomenal the last 2 years, going on 3 now. So we're happy about that. Obviously, we want to thank Z-Pro Lithium, proud sponsor, keeping Zach and I powered all year long. Cast King Rods and Reels for everything that they do for us. Check them out, castking.com. And obviously, Basco Fishing. Don't have the Basco swag on tonight. It's chilling out outside, so got the hoodie back on. But Basco Fishing, hit up my boy Chris. He's got some really awesome apparel. He's getting ready to drop some new threads coming here early this spring, so be on the lookout for those. But yeah, Evolve Fishing, if you guys are interested in some killer rod sleeves, check those guys out. JKT 15 if you guys want 15% off on some killer rod sleeves. So check those out, evolvefishing.com. And yeah, so that's the people we're thanking for helping us out with this podcast, and for Orion and Jackaon Kayak. Hope you guys are enjoying some of those cool products out there. But anyway, our guest is back. I paid the bills while you were
My
gone,
apologies.
so it worked out perfect. I needed to do that anyway. So
Did you go to commercial break?
it was kind of a commercial break. Yeah, you could say that. I did the necessities while you took care of the necessities.
To your
Let's
point,
see.
though, before I left, you mentioned something, right? That was the key to how we used to market kayaks.
Yeah.
It was the come on out. Like we got everything. We got life vests, we got
Mhm.
paddles, we got kayaks. Us guys that were doing the sponsorship thing back then, we had several.
Mhm.
So what better way to sell a product and put someone in it and give them an
Mhm.
experience, right? Like
Yeah.
it wasn't about sponsoring a social media post or paying $100 to get that post to go further.
Oh yeah.
The one thing that worked better than all else was putting a butt in the seat of a kayak. Because, like you said, after that day of fishing, 9 times out of 10, they went to a shop that you told them to go to and they bought a kayak.
Yeah.
It was different.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it was completely different. And one of the cool things why you were actually on your vacation from fishing, Emily Jackson has kind of come into the fold as our marketing director at Jackaon Kayak. And one of the things that I'm going to say brought back, but she didn't, she just kind of developed a different way to do it. She calls it the Jackaon Kayak Fun Tour. So what you do is she'll actually get a group of paddlers together. They'll go meet up at a different shop or wherever, or a pool, and they'll have a few whitewater demos and different things like that. Put some people on in boats, teach them how to roll, some different things like that. Just basically small clinics. So I think it's still around. Jameson did do some of it in the fishing space last year. Some of the team guys got to help put some of that on. It wasn't quite the same as the whitewater, and that's one of the things that we are working on for 2024, 2025 is to, how do we make those better fishing based seminars, so we're not just standing around maybe at a dealership, waiting on people to walk in. But there was pizza, there was beer, there was all kinds of different things, trying to get people welcome to come out to a dealer, try out and demo a boat. I think that was a neat thing. It's a little bit different twist than what we used to do it, but it's still that same concept of trying to build a community through the doors of a dealership.
And back then, you had to support the dealerships, right? Because, like,
Hmm.
for Jackson back then, I mean, I don't know if you guys still have this, but they had that star program. That's how I got started with Jackson.
Yep.
And that was genius, right? Like, why not
Hmm.
set up sponsorships through a local shop to drive traffic to the shop? And
Hmm.
then that also gave Jackson a pool of candidates to pull up to a national level where applicable. It was
Hmm.
really smart. And the other thing I'll add is like the STAR program was pretty awesome back then. Like the way they
Yeah.
supported an angler was I mean, I don't know what you guys do these days, but it was good support.
Yeah.
Just based on the
Well, and
way, you got your annual boat, you kind of went through the process. If you wanted additional boats, you got them at a discount or whatever it was. But just driving that traffic to the retailer was very smart.
mhm. Well, and it's what got a lot of us to where we're at today is because we took those kinds of things seriously and worked shows and did the different things, and it was a great way to stair step yourself. Things are a little bit different now, but they're changing and evolving as we kind of work on a little bit of a reset for some of the different things that we were doing. But when you go through different changes, that's just part of the process to kind of get it back in line to where it needs to go.
And
Let's
anyone
see,
that
pizza.
knows kind of like my fishing career, I have a huge amount of respect for Jackson. Jackson did a lot for me. It was a very mutually beneficial relationship. Like one thing I'll never forget that I got to experience in life. Um, I don't know how much she's still around, but there was this angler, Samantha Gay. Back
Oh,
in the
she's
day,
still around.
she invited me down to South Carolina to a farm, and basically the whole gist of it was we're going to take like 100 plus fifth graders. They're going to show
I
up in
remember that.
buses, and we're going to fish with them. We're going to teach them how to kayak. And literally, like, I loaded up my vehicle with a trailer full of kayaks, drove down there, and was taking these fifth graders out in Jackson kayaks. And Jackson kayaks supported all that. Like, it was one of the most amazing experiences ever. Remember, some little kid flipped over on purpose, and she looked at me right before she did it. She was like, "I'm going to freak all the teachers out." And I was like, "Please don't." And then she rolled out of the kayak on purpose, and there's like teachers screaming. And I'm like, "Trust me, she's fine. She said she was going to do this." And it was a whole thing.
Oh my gosh. I remember you doing that, actually. I remember very vividly you guys going down there and doing that. I don't remember who all went with you, but I remember you going.
Yeah, I think it was me and one other Jackson angler, and then my
Yeah.
girlfriend at the time. And he brought some kayaks. I loaded a whole trailer up full of kayaks.
Mhm.
We just paddled these kids around a farm pond on this huge southern farm, and they had a
That was
blast. Like they were loving it.
yeah, that was very cool. Let's see. Fun tour Tennessee, muskie, bass, stripers, and everything in between. Charlie will be your guide, and he knows a great place for breakfast afterwards. He said he's buying. Let's see. Like we get talking, and like the questions come in faster, or the comments come in faster than I can
No,
pop
I'm
them up
trying to
on the
look through
screen.
them now at peak.
Rudy, yes, you can come go river fishing with me anytime you would like. You are always welcome. I will put you up for the weekend anytime. You don't even have to bring a boat, bro. You can use one of mine. You just fly out. I'll pick you up. Um, yeah, man. I mean, it's crazy. So where you're at now, are you? Do you feel like the fire's back completely?
The fire's different. I know enough now to understand what was most important to me, and that's what I'm going for. Like, I kind of bullshitted around and said I'm getting back into tournament fishing and doing all that, but like I never really explained how I'm going to do it. Like I'm not trying to chase big tournaments. I have no interest in
Hmm.
Hobie or KBF or any of that. I just want to travel around and visit the local trails I used to fish and hang out with the
Hmm.
people I used to hang out with that are still around. And yeah, in that sense, I'm back. And in that sense, the fire is 1,000% there. Like my goal is to have those enjoyable times. I don't care if I win. I don't care about money from a tournament or any of that. Like, I want to rent a house in Tennessee,
Hmm.
invite all the people I haven't seen in 8 years over to the house, back the way we used to do it, right? Like, come over. Maybe someone knows how to cook and barbecue, and we'll give them some cash and
We
pitch
could
in
just
and they can
stay at
barbecue.
Charlie's.
And
We just stay at Charlie's.
yeah, like, and that it's funny you say that, but that's how it used to be, right?
Yeah,
Like, I
Charlie will
used to
come and
say, like, I'm coming down to such and such area for a tournament, and people would just reach out to me like, stay at my house. And I was
yeah.
always amazed by that, right? And it always worked out, and people went back and forth with that stuff. I was kind of curious if that still happened, but it seems it's no different.
No, I mean, I think it does happen to an extent. I don't think it happens as much. I think, we all travel a little bit different than what we do and what we used to. And you know, I mean, I don't camp as well as I used to. Like the Holiday Inn's pretty cush anymore. That's about as it's about as camping as I've gotten in a long time. But I'm okay with that, as long as you got a good group of dudes and
After my
it's
neck
all good.
surgery, I don't do sleeping on the ground. I retired
Yeah.
that fact. Like I'll rent a house, maybe a cabin or something, but like
Cabin,
the
house, yeah,
yeah,
somewhere to
the on
crash.
the ground stuff I'm too old for.
But yeah, I mean, a good Tennessee river float sounds epic. We need to set that up, dude. Like get some players back together, and Tennessee sounds like a good spot to do it.
Tennessee is amazing. The section I fished for the River Bastion Championship years ago, I did pretty well in it. I had to drag for over a mile to get
Mhm.
out of inch deep water. And it paid off huge. I'll never give that spot up because it wasn't mine to give up. But man, like I dragged for about a mile and a half in trickles of water. Like we're talking the whole creek was this wide, and I'm just dragging a kayak through it. And then all of a sudden, like a euphoric circumstance, the woods just opened up into this big pool and just spread out on this farm where I imagine they dredged a piece of this little tiny creek for farming or whatever. But the fish that were in that section, oh, but that's the adventure, right? Like I drug for a mile to get there. Like I'm tired. I don't want to drag anymore, but I got the reward. And that's what used to be so fun about it.
Oh yeah, it's still. I mean, to me, I think it's that kid that's inside you that never leaves. I don't think. I think you just find different ways to wake him up to get out of the mundane circle that is life. And when you're out there in a little plastic boat doing dumb things, he comes alive again. It's like riding your bicycle to the street light. Come on, it's that kid again when you're out there in the boat.
I had one long conversation with my girlfriend one night trying to like explain what the river means to me. And I think she absorbs it too well because now, like, if I'm being irritable or shitty, she'll be like, go sit by the river for a little while. Like, it's what she literally tells me to do. Like, just go down the street to the river, okay? Come back later. But that's what it
I,
is, though. It's
yeah,
just, it's relaxing, it's peaceful, it takes you away from your life and kind of just washes all that stuff away for a couple hours.
it does, and it's a beautiful, beautiful time. Well, dude, like, so I gotta ask you, what do you feel like is next for you besides, just kind of getting back into this at a slow pace? Are you gonna wake Noah up?
So I'll always fish with Noah. Whether or not he chooses to get involved in a tournament's up to him. I'm gonna try to drag him to one. So there's gonna be a tournament this year on my river, like right by my house. He
Mhm.
doesn't know this yet. Maybe he'll see this, but I'm gonna try to be like, hey, guest room, come up, fish this tournament with me. We'll see what can happen. It's a local tournament trail. I'll see if
Oh
I
yeah.
can get him to come back around. I don't know if I'm gonna get him back on Facebook. I think he's over this stuff, but
Oh yeah.
at
I
that
think
point,
so.
him and I actually work together, so I still talk to the dude every day. Like, I don't know if people understand this, but Noah and I met a little over 10 years ago. We started kind of like working together through Kayak Anglers as a nonprofit, and 412 is my business. But whenever we kind of like segued out of fishing, him and I both ended up working for the same consulting firm. We ended up both working for the same tech company. Now we both work for the same software company. So him and I have been super close for years. I don't think that's ever going to go away. So chances of you
No.
seeing me on the water with him are very good.
Well, I hope so. It's been a hot minute since I've seen him or got a chance to talk to him, but definitely miss him and his wisdom. He was
Yeah, I think it.
he's always been
I
a
think
good
I'll,
one.
I'll drag him out this year. I don't know if he'll come back to the whole social media thing, but I'm definitely going to try to get
Yeah.
him out to an event.
It's not for everybody. He's gonna have to get on it sooner or later. His boy's getting older.
Yeah,
You're gonna have to
and
keep a watch.
the other thing too, like as far as like where I plan to go with all this, nowhere really. Like I don't have any desires. Like I
To
don't
the
want
river.
sponsorships. I don't. Yeah, exactly. Like to the river and to the people that I miss. Yeah,
There you
John
go.
Rapp said something the other day. Like I'm just so glad to see Don's back into kayak fishing, and I'm like thinking to myself, like I just want to see people like you again. That's what I
Yeah.
miss. You know, maybe someday I'll get back into business in the fishing industry. I've tossed around the idea. Probably not the same way that I did it. I don't want to manufacture a damn thing ever again. So
You don't
there's
want to burn.
that.
You like to keep the skin on your hands this round.
Yeah. Manufacturing's tough. Like I might get into
It
like
is.
retail sales or something, an outfitter, who knows? But like as I get to the point that I can retire, that might be my backup plan. I don't know.
Gene says no. Used to verify all my Bassin entries. He was their encouragement. Noah was a great encouragement. I probably wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for Noah. Um,
Something to
but
be said
yeah,
about the impact that guy had on a lot of people.
he did. He had a huge impact on a lot of people. Like I said, I wouldn't be where I'm at today if it wasn't for his early guidance and yours, obviously, as well.
I think he
You guys,
connected us by chance, by the way.
yeah, he connected us, and then there was Doug at Hoorag, and there's just a group of you guys that kind of helped me and Zach Bailiff, and yeah, now we're here. Like, took two guys that were like into boat fishing, and now we're like kayak gurus. I don't even know if we call ourselves gurus. That's kind of like that feels arrogant. I'm not a guru. I'm just
You
a
think
dude that
about it
likes
for a
bass.
second, and you look back to the original stuff. The beauty of kayak fishing is there was no gurus. It
Nah,
just was what it was. It was just
it's just
grassroots. Just show up. Like maybe someone knows a little bit more than you and they help you out, but the next week you're going to be someone that knows a little bit more than somebody else and you're going to help them out. It's kind of what
yeah.
made it beautiful.
It was all about PVC and DIY pages, DIY groups.
Drilling holes and shit and gluing things on stuff that you shouldn't be thinking about. Milk
we had
crates and
we had Luther on an episode, and like he is the DIY page now. I mean, he's got everything. But it was fun to have him on and talk about some of the early stuff, like what you and I have talked about as far as rigging and different things. And it's fun to hear his take on it and see like absolutely how far it's gotten the manufacturing process that he's got now to make sure that we're not going to Lowe's and buying PVC and stealing crates out of the bathroom or out of the back of the grocery stores anymore and all the different things.
I still have an original black pack, like
The
the old school, whatever that board is called, like not even close to waterproof, nothing.
I've still got my J crate and I'm holding on to it with my cold dead hands. I think, if I could be cremated, I think I want to go out in my J crate because you're not going to get nothing like those ever again.
The only reason I still have my black pack is because I think it's a one of a kind and the only one that was ever made in white. So I have a white black pack, and one of my old school retailers from back in the day was Columbus Kayak. And
Mm-hmm.
for one of their tournaments, they had engraved on a white black pack Columbus Kayak, and Luther donated it for the tournament. And I placed and won this black pack that was actually white. Still to this day, I have that thing. And there's a dude that used to work at Columbus Kayak that through the years has repeatedly asked me if he can have it yet. And I just keep saying no.
No, absolutely not. You think any of these things that we've got will ever be like somebody's going to be going through like dead people stuff at some antique store one of these days? They're going to be like, "Man, I remember this kayak fish thing. This was awesome."
I still have the original 412 Bait Coast shirt that was ever made. I like, there's a lot of cool shit that's hiding in people's closets, like
Oh yeah,
that will never be reproduced. And like, by the time it ends up in somebody's hand, they might not even understand what it is. But like, there's
probably
some
not.
really cool old shit. Like, imagine the first black pack Luther ever made is probably out there somewhere. And
Yeah,
by the time
very
it
good
resurfaces,
possibility.
it might not mean anything to anyone, but like to us, it would. It's important
Oh yeah,
stuff.
it is. I mean, even kayaks, like one of these days, the Kusa will get to the point where the OG will get to the point where it is very, very, very rare. And there's still a lot of them out there right now, but it will hit a time when it gets very, very rare. It'll be hard telling what they'll be worth.
I'm never letting mine go. Now that I got it back, like it's a one of a kind. I've never seen one made in that color ever before. Yeah.
Russell wants
So
to know, is it the original shirt with the black and orange smalley?
So I have a ton of those, but no. So the original shirt, and this brings me to the original stickers too. So the original shirt like had this weird little like 412 bait co really stock kind of like emblem. None of the
Mhm.
fish or any of that shit that people remember. This was way before that. And I still have this. And then the other thing that was really cool, some people will remember this, some of this won't. When I first started my company, my girlfriend had labels made for my bags. And it was the most generic logo of a fish head and a little hook. It
Mhm.
was like stock photo from some
Mhm.
random
Clip
print
art.
this label website. And but to the people that remember getting a bag with that on it, it's special, right? Like there's
Oh
probably
yeah.
people that probably could pull up a picture of one of those bags right now. And like that's what was cool about all of it, right? Like
Mhm.
I got to share that with other people. And still to this day, people get excited about that shit. Like just remembering the beginning and knowing that they were a part of it.
Yeah, I've actually still I'm down to just about 0, but I still have a few bags. I've still got, like, 1 bag of tubes that you had actually made, but, man, it's getting down to just about nothing, and, like, those don't come out unless it's, like, dire consequences. It's like, because I can't get it anymore, but then they end up like the phase 4 and wrecked.
Believe it or not, man, a lot of that stuff's available again. And Joe's the kind of dude that if somebody goes to him and be like, hey, we need cold steel back, he might do it. So it's
Yeah.
up to everybody. Like, if that's shit you want, just go ask him. He might do it. I mean, honestly, I've like, I don't know, probably like a $400 order in with him right now because I don't know how to fish anything else. I got my whole tournament career revolves around those baits. So like I got back into it the last end of last year and I'm like in the store looking at stuff and I'm like, this isn't what works for me. And
Mhm.
then I went to Joe and was like, hey, can I get some of this, this, and this? And he sent me a small order and I'm catching fish. And then I joked about it the one day. I'm like, how the hell do I have one salt and pepper free minnow left? Like that should never happen in my life. Like any given time, I had 10 bags of that shit that I could hand out to other people, let alone keep myself stocked. So like over the course of this winter, I just placed this huge order and was like, I got to restock. I got to get myself back where I belong with this stuff because that's all I know.
I would love to show you Cold Steel, but I do not have any anymore, Rudy. Sorry. Um, rest in peace. That's all I can. That's all I can tell you, bud. What I can do though, let's do this. I'm gonna open this in a new tab. We'll show you the face spinnerbait. That way, you guys can at least see that. Move to a new window. Boom. All right. Let's go to here. Go to present, share screen. Boom, boom, boom. Windows. Share. There you guys go. Phase 5 spinnerbait. Comes in 3/8 and a quarter ounce only. None of this half ounce, none of the fancy stuff. It's all right there. Tennessee shad. That was another one of my favorites, man.
That was the bait that went with cold steel perfectly.
Yep. Chartreuse shad. Let's see. The Yodas, soft plastics. Let's go down here to swim
I think it's
baits.
under swim baits.
Yeah, the best trailer ever. Right here. The Yoda 4.5 and the 3.5. But you got to buy the 3.5. You don't buy the 4.5 for the trailer. Select
4.5
option.
is fish by yourself. The 3.5 is your trailer. Both for
Yeah.
swim jigs and spinner baits all day.
Yeah. But that was the one. The closest, the Dreamsicle version, that was obviously the trailer. Tennessee Smoke is about as close, Rudy, as you can get to Cold Steel. It had more of a bluish flake to it and a little bit of a
Go to
I don't
PA
know.
Blue Crawl. That is basically cold steel, but blue instead of silver, basically.
Yeah, very similar. The tail would probably pass off actually because that's probably most of what you're going to see. Yeah, pearl white. So if you guys are looking for a cool trailer,
My
Telling you.
favorite combo was the Copperhead Yoda for the trailer and
Mm-hmm.
the Dreamsicle spinnerbait. The contrast, the way the skirt flowed over the darker color trailer, perfect.
There's got pretty good. Looks good, man. It looks
Now you
sweet.
got me reminiscing over here. Like
I know. I know.
I couldn't even
That's
make a
why I
bait if
brought
I
you
tried right now. I don't even think I remember how.
it. Then there's the free line right there. Come
The
on.
5-inch free minnow in tournament
Mm-hmm.
series thinking.
Mm-hmm. Look,
Weightless.
there's all the different versions. And like you bought it like this, but it was like really the ultimate Ned because you could go with the rip the tail off, and then you had the 3.5, and it was like it was it was the Ned before the Ned. I still got some of the small ones. The crappie will kill those things.
Yeah, they even have the little tiny. I think there's like what 1 and a 5 inch. I think he still makes. That was the crappie killer.
Yeah, right there.
Or 175.
There's
Yep.
1.175.
I don't
Yeah,
even
they
remember
were.
my own shit. That's sad.
Yeah. But yeah, those
Get
dudes
old.
were. Those are some crappie killers for sure, right there. They just knock the crap out of them. I mean, look at it all. He got all kinds of stuff, stinger fry, and he's added some stuff. I mean, he had the other bait company too when he come in and got with 412, didn't he?
Yeah, and not only that, he's like I was just talking to him recently. He's had a huge run on crappie baits. Like people
Hmm.
are eating the crappie baits up, his and the old 412 stuff. Apparently, somebody made a video. You know how it goes these days, right? Somebody
Oh
made a
yeah,
video, it went viral, and now he's selling tons of crappie baits. I used to struggle to sell the little shit.
dude. I just wish we could have got the phase vibration, the vibrating jig. I wish it would have made an entry before you stopped. That's
I
all I
never
can
wanted
say.
to do it because of the legal ramifications that ran around it, right? Like it
All
wasn't my
right.
thing. I wasn't trying to get a cease and desist and deal with all that crap. But yeah, I agree 1,000%. For a while though, Z-Man literally had a chatterbait in Dreamsicle. I'm
Hmm.
not going to say how that came to be, but it existed after the Dreamsicle Phase 3 was born. And
Hmm.
those were awesome, but then they disappeared. They're not available anymore. But it was
Yeah.
literally a dreamsicle skirt on a chatterbait, but they faded away. I think they called it gold
Oh,
shad.
good man. I had a brownish colored one. I don't think it was near. It had a gold blade. Ryan's got one for you.
He was supposed to come float with me last fall down the river, and his truck broke down literally that morning or something. He was like, I can't make it. And I'm like, all right, I'm going anyway. And I still went, had my girlfriend pick me up, but we were supposed to do a float together. I luckily got to touch base with a couple people and do floats late last year. Steve Basto was one of the dudes I jumped out on the water with. I got a couple people locally like that I knew from back then that just live up
Hmm.
here, and we could fish the Clarion River together. And I've learned the river pretty well, pretty fast. I mean, it's like anything else, right? I traveled all over fishing rivers. I just had to Google pre-fish and find the spots, but
Hmm.
it didn't take long.
It's all fun and games till Google gets you in a wintertime thing or high water situation. Like he can't see what you want to see.
I guess that's an asterisk, right? Like Google
Yeah.
pre-fishing's cool on rivers, but you have to be also looking at the gauges because what you see on Google might not be what is there today. So a
Hmm.
combination of both is how you keep yourself safe. But that's
Yep.
the best way to pre-fish river. Just get on Google, look at a river, and just start scrolling through that whole river. Find spots that look fishy, look for the breaks in the water surface, find the swift
Hmm.
stuff. Yeah.
Check your float, map your float. All
Yep.
right, dude. Well, we've made it an hour and 33 minutes. So I know you got to go to work in the morning, and
Yes.
everybody would probably like it if I actually did something tomorrow. So I'm gonna let you go, dude. I'm gonna let you thank the people, and if people want to find you on the socials and hear more about your fishing trips, you can tell them where to find you.
Yeah, so if you look me up, I don't use my personal page anymore to post fishing stuff. I have like, the old like follow page, Donald Corbett, easy to find. But yeah, all I'm gonna do is just post kind of like going out on the water this weekend. Pictures of some fish and stuff. Nothing crazy. No marketing or any of that. Just enjoying myself. Maybe even get informational from time to time.
There you go, man. I like it. Well, guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you missed this episode and others, you can check us out always on Spotify, Google Podcast. Well, it's YouTube Podcast now. Wherever podcasts are held, as long as it's not Apple Podcast. One day, I promise, Zach and I will get Apple Podcast figured out. But until then, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next week. Doc Talk will be back next week. Orion Podcast is back next week. So come on back now.